Shrek is one of those animated movies that you watch as a kid and really enjoy, but as you grow up, you wonder, how did I ever watch this as a kid? Regardless, the movie does deserve its high status today because it's just great. It has talented voice actors, a great soundtrack, an epic villain, and really a story that's just timeless. And although some of the jokes haven't aged too well, this is still a movie to watch whenever you're feeling down, because I guarantee you, Shrek will always get you back up again. Just ask Donkey. Out of all three movies in the Madagascar franchise, the third one is definitely my favorite. I grew up with the first one as a kid, and I was never really interested in the second one. But the third one just took everything I loved about the original two and brought it all together. It brought amazing side characters, an epic story, pretty badass villain, and really jokes that stick with me to this day. I will never forget the tiny birds in pillows joke. So imagine my surprise when I found out a lot of people actually really hate this film, and honestly, I don't understand why. Sure, there are some scenes in this movie that lag on, but those are balanced out by scenes that are just truly incredible. And that circus scene at the end of the movie will always be the best moment in the entire Madagascar franchise, Penguins of Madagascar included. Curse of the Were-Rabbit is another one of those movies that I watched as a kid, and I got most of the jokes, but I can only truly appreciate the humor and wit as an adult. This is definitely the best out of the three Aardman movies that DreamWorks produced. Everything from the story, to the humor, to the characters, to the animation just comes together so perfectly in this movie. Although it's not one of the more rewatchable movies on this list, this will always have a special place in my heart. Over the Hedge never seemed to be a masterpiece level movie to me, but when I started to really look at this movie, I noticed just how amazing it was really. It has sympathetic characters, a great trio of villains, and a moral that stands even to this day, as well as having one of the best soundtracks in any DreamWorks movie of all time. Not to mention, it's just laugh out loud hilarious. Although for some reason, after I watch this movie, I always get hungry, no matter what. Maybe that's just my problem. Now this is a movie that is a true masterpiece. My mom always tells me that this is one of the first movies I've ever watched in a theater, and honestly, I'm not in a place to argue with her. There's not much to say about this movie that hasn't already been said. The animation is incredible, the villain is ferocious, and the protagonist is just amazing. The only thing I didn't like about this movie was how the Furious Five were shown to not really like Poe in the first movie, but in the sequels and series, they're shown to be his best friends. Like, really? It happened that fast, huh? But nonetheless, this movie deserves all its praise and all the awards it's gotten, and it definitely deserved to start one of DreamWorks' biggest franchises of all time. I think it'll go without saying that How to Train Your Dragon is probably my favorite franchise in DreamWorks. The story of each of these movies is absolutely incredible. The animation gets better with every movie, and Hiccup and Toothless are one of the best duos in DreamWorks' history. But for this movie specifically, the animation is spectacular, the soundtrack is amazing, I will never get over Stoic's death, and Drago is an absolutely incredible villain. This movie probably made me feel the most emotional out of the whole three. But if you need any confirmation that the score of this movie is as good as the other two, I dare you to listen to the soundtrack of Stoic's funeral. I have never heard a more emotional score with such a fitting scene. I'm saying it right here, right now. Megamind is the Emperor's New Groove of DreamWorks. Think about it. This movie stars a reformed protagonist and is one of the funniest, if not the funniest movie in DreamWorks' history. I am not kidding when I say this. When I say Megamind is one of the most underrated movies in DreamWorks' entire catalog, you know that I mean it. But aside from this movie's humor, this movie also boasts an impressive voice cast, great action, and a killer soundtrack. I now quote Megamind almost on a daily basis. I cannot go 3 days without saying the word presentation as dramatically as I can. But all in all, this is probably the funniest DreamWorks movie out there. So if you're ever feeling down, just turn on Megamind and remember that it's better than Despicable Me. Oh boy, if you thought Kung Fu Panda 1 was a masterpiece, just wait until you see the second one. Everything the first movie laid the groundwork for, the second movie improves it tenfold. Everything from the animation to the action to the writing has gotten better in this movie. Not to mention that Lord Shen is probably the scariest and most evil villain DreamWorks has ever created. Another great thing being that how many times in history have you seen a sequel be better received than the first movie? All in all, I'm so glad this movie is part of the Kung Fu Panda franchise because honestly, I could never see the franchise without this movie again. If we were talking about movies that made DreamWorks the animation powerhouse that it is today, How to Train Your Dragon would be probably somewhere close to the top of the list. While the early 2000s were conquered by the Shrek franchise, the 2010s were taken over by the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, and really? It's not hard to see why. While I do appreciate the 2 sequels and series that this movie spawned, there is nothing that will ever beat the original, and you cannot talk me out of that. This movie does everything a movie should do. It establishes the characters, gives you a reason to care about them, gives you an interesting conflict, and gives you reason to actually watch the movie. No wonder so many people put this at the best movie in DreamWorks' history. And I can see why. While it's not at the top for me, it's definitely one that deserves this special spot. Alright, now I know what you're gonna say. Oh, come on. Really? This movie over How to Train Your Dragon. But hear me out. This is probably the most detailed movie in terms of animation that DreamWorks has ever made. Everything from Sandy actually having sun shapes in his eyes to Pitch having an eclipse shape in his eyes just show you how much level of detail was put into this movie and how much care and love was also put into it. The main protagonist, Jack Frost, is extremely relatable in terms of he is not alone in this world, but he feels like it. The Guardians themselves are an extremely colorful cast of characters, all voiced by A-list celebrities, including Hugh Jackman and Alec Baldwin. But really, they set the stage for what the movie is about. In case you don't know, the Guardians movie is based off the Guardians of Childhood book series by William Joyce. I definitely recommend a read. And I truly believe the first 4 books are canon to this movie. Just not the 5th one. When you read it, you'll understand. Every character in this movie is unique and brings something new. Like, when was the last time you thought of Jack Frost as a teenager? Or the Easter Bunny as some sort of professional wrestler? Or the Tooth Fairy as some sort of half-hummingbird creature? And while some people are put off by these designs, I personally love them. They bring something new to animation that wasn't there before. The story itself is absolutely beautiful, with Jack Frost's backstory being the main conflict of this movie. Besides Pitch, of course. And if you read the books, you'll truly understand his character and why he is so great, even though he might be a little weak in this movie. The animation itself in this movie is absolutely spectacular. And although I've heard people don't like the designs of some of the human characters and the Tooth Fairy, I personally don't have a problem with them. Honestly, I could probably go on for hours what I love about this movie. All the little details, behind the scenes stuff, and even the soundtrack. But I'm not going to. I'm going to save that for another video, because that's just how much I love this movie. But remember, this is all my opinion. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. But until next time, remember, when the moon tells you something, believe it. Goodbye!